Next question will come from Manish.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Inatullah. Such profound insights. Really enjoying this conversation.
Thank you.
My question is going to kind of be a follow-up to the leadership question and then the way you defined, the spiritual view. I mean, we do live in a capitalist world right now where like, materialism has like taken over the psyche of human beings. How do you envision like the transition from like a materialistic world to spiritual world?
Yeah, that's the question. That's the toughest question for all of us, right? Uh, so the frameworks we use is three horizons. So horizon one is the reality of today, whether it's a product, your emotional state, or the capitalist system. Horizon three is where you wish to go. That's the vision, the dream, the impossible, the long term. Horizon two is the mess. If you read Gramsci, he talks about in the interim, that's when the monsters come out. So this is not just in the in-between stages, when you're in between stages in the world system, when hegemons shift, when systems shift. This is a unique period in history. Again, as Sri Sarkar talked about, the rise of the global brain through the internet, the challenge of one type of hegemony with new hegemons coming up, the challenge going from fossil fuels to renewables, the challenge of patriarchy to gender equity. This is not one change, it's at least 6, 7 dramatic changes. Now, in that shift, he argued if Prout or Prout similar organizations don't emerge as a dominant paradigm, then, as Gramsci said, the monsters awake. Those are individual systems that focus on war, violence, power for the few. And that's our challenge. So we imagine a new global governance, far more inclusion, different houses. Today we have a UN veto system. How do we get to the next system? And so in our futures week, we do something called backcasting. We assume 2050, 2080 has happened. Then we ask ourselves, what happened the last 20, 30, 40 years? We populate from the future to the present with ideas, with possibilities, and we work on them. Now, another answer to your question, I really don't have a good answer to this. I am perplexed by this. I think about this all the time. So I wish I could say, here's what will happen. I can't. I know recently the Malaysian government came out and said, okay, we reject the veto power system. How about you can't just have one veto, given the power of the Security Council? How about you have to have two vetoes? So that's a step forward. Or you have a far more open Security Council. All those are on the table, but the people in the council, why would they change? Right? That's your question. There's no incentive to change. Why should I change? I've got the power. So at the individual level, I see individuals change when there's a health crisis. So if we see that at the systemic level, systems change when there's a health crisis. Clearly, climate change is a health crisis which challenges all of us. We have to make the transition, even though there's still some deniers. So the systemic challenges evoke extermination, and thus the system changes. That's hopeful one. Hopeful two, if you go back now to the 14th century, if you remember that transition in Europe, there was a 100-year battle at least between the cathedral and the castle. In Sarkar's language, between the Cotrians, the Warriors, and the Veprins. Which way would that go? And that 100-year battle was, if you look back, was profound. During that battle, well, no, the cathedrals will win, the priests will win. No, the warriors will win, will stay as a feudal monarchy type system. That battle goes on, and eventually what's unique is the victory is outside castle and cathedral. It's the burghers, the capitalists, the people in the markets. They transform and create the world capitalist system, which starts from the 15th century in which we're in. So this is the unique part. The victors were not even in the debate; they were outside. They were the outliers. They might say, they were the Bedouins. So is there a third force that starts to emerge that challenges the entire system? And so in our work in futures, we try to find those third forces, the third ways, and try to encourage them, support them, and hope for them. But that doesn't respond to your core question. Realist, violent power works.
No, I think you did talk about, the crisis. I mean, I do kind of completely agree that that could be and then will be a trigger for change, because normally people and systems, they don't want to change unless, they have to change. So, but yeah, I mean, good,
I
good,
know
good
when we
insight.
look at the visions, we were working with the government of New Zealand in their infrastructure commission, and they said, please help us think through the transition from GDP to well-being. And now there's many countries exploring it because their conclusion was we can say what we want, but at the end of the day, the accountants count. So what do you count? We're all counters. Are you counting GDP or are you counting individual mental, cultural, spiritual health? So they said, what if well-being was our new measurement? What would infrastructure look like? Is it number of cars or is it the walkability of the city? Is it industry or is it the breathability of the air? Is it number of official institutions or is it a flow of spiritual energy? What are we counting? Years lived. So you see the great series about blue zones on Netflix, where the areas people live longer. And so there's some insights there. So I think there's this transition we see everywhere. At the same time, we do live in a world system that doesn't want to give up the goods.
Yeah.
And so we're all of us stuck. So we have to live in both worlds. That's what I advise young people. Clearly, you live in a capitalist, egotistical system, and you need to understand those rules. Clearly, you want a different world. You have to vision and live as much as you can in those worlds and try to practice it. So if you're totally living in a spiritual world, you're going to be in trouble. My mother, when I was very small, she used to always say, trust in Allah, but tie your camel. I mean, you don't have a camel. I don't have a camel. But her point was totally trust in consciousness, but also, don't leave your wallet on the street. So this was this balance between living in a capitalist system and we want a different system. So this is where the rules of the state have to change from supporting, incentivizing corporate to supporting, incentivizing the cooperative economy. And we have to be trained. The number of cooperatives I've been to and I worked with where people are horrible to each other. They're really horrible to each other. But you're running a co-op. Why do you hate each other so much? And I realized, okay, there's no independent judiciary to say you're wrong, you're right. We don't have training on cooperation. If you follow American basketball, the big transition was Michael Jordan. And he said, aha, the way to win basketball is to be the hero. He created a new archetype. Then D'Antoni comes in with the Rockets and then influences Golden State Warriors and says, no, it's not the hero, it's follow the energy. And that was a huge transition where now Golden State said, no, it's energy ball. Whoever has energy, you give the ball to them. And what he was saying was, no, this is cooperative. You never know who has the energy one day, right? Some days it's you, some days it's me, some day, and so you give the energy to the right person. That's a deeper type of leadership. So I see in transitions, and if you look at, you say, well, that's an interesting idea, but so what? Well, the people who followed D'Antoni's model made billions and billions of dollars because they did better than everyone else because they understood cooperation not only feels good, it leads to within the current system success. So we've seen that with meditation mindfulness. It makes you feel better. And within the system, it enhances your productivity, which is why the whole mindfulness revolution in terms of now $100 billion industry, much more than that. So we have
Agreed.
to do well at both and help extricate ourselves from the current system to a better system.
And I think maybe the education policy and education kind of system over a new generation, that will also play like a big role as to how the young generation thinks about life, about the material life versus the spiritual life. It could start from like a bottoms up education movement as well, changing the curriculum in like schools and universities. So
I mean, that's what when they asked Sri Sarkar, how come you only have one university and millions of schools you want to create, small schools? He goes, well, look, because I'm thinking about the next 50, 100, 500 years. Exactly your point. You want to start to have people who find it easy to enter emotional, spiritual literacy. That's a segue from the current system. The new system is easy.
okay, no, thank you. Thank you for that answer. My next question is actually going to be on cooperatives. And I know you mentioned cooperatives. So, Cooperatives are a key to the proutist economy. Currently, we are seeing that corporations have tremendous power and even sway politics, all around the world. How do you envision like transforming like current corporations into democratic institutions like cooperatives?
The current system will only accede if it can better meet its needs. Right? So that's the argument. If you meditate, you'll get your work done quicker and you get more time to rest. If you do the cooperative structure, you'll be able to produce more and make your workers happy and your board happy and your customers happy. That's the argument. That it's more effective, it's more efficient, it's more economical, and it's better. Given climate change, it's better for the world. So that's the argument within the system where people buy into co-ops, and I'm seeing that. Argument two, in the long term, it actually creates a circulation of money which benefits all. That's the second argument. To move towards this, it's convincing enough leaders, governments, that this will enhance your economy. And here's the data around it. Right now, we have cooperative successes, but we have cooperative failures as well. We can see in the Asia Pacific region, the countries that did the best, the first thing they did, they destroyed the power of the landlord class. If you go back to the last 50, 60 years, the landlord class owned the land, and thus they were landless laborers throughout India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, everywhere, which ensured generations of poverty. The ones who broke that, Taiwan, Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, they said, no, we're going to end that world and create a different world. The ruling class of agriculture was broken. So this is kind of the system we're in now. How do we break the power of the corporate class? Is it regulatory within the nation? Or I think from a Prout view, it's post-nation, which raises the next question. Prout is a global system outside the nation state. How do we move from a nation-centric system to a global system? If you have an answer for that, I really want to know. I mean, this is where we're stuck in a world after visas to a world controlled by visas, a world after the credit card to a world controlled by the credit card. So we're in this transition. It's a difficult transition. And the parts we can see are, renewable energy makes much more sense now. In one country, we're working with the energy company. They said, actually, the uptake in solar is so powerful that we have to pay people during a few hours every day to turn on the lights. The system has become unstable because people have moved towards solar. So imagine South Asia in a total solar regime. It could be done in 10, 15 years. Energy for all practical purposes would be free. I know that's a strong word. But the first phase is the grid gets unstable. There's too much energy in the system now. How do we manage all these different types of energy? Fossil, wind, hydro, solar. And suddenly the grid is decentralized. You have to now integrate it at a new level. So this is what we're saying. As the nation state ends, you need a new integrated model of a global governance system. As the fossil fuel system ends, we have to have an integrated renewable solar system model. The best energy companies we've worked with are saying, aha, that's who we are. We used to be the ones who just kept the lights on. I see that in Pakistan with load shedding. Now we have to be the connectors, connecting each home in your model, which you were saying, you have energy co-ops. So you have 30, 50 homes in a village that produce energy. We were working for one country in Africa 7 years ago, the largest energy company in Africa. And they said, what's the future of energy? I said, well, you're brilliant engineers. I'm not. Tell me. So after a day working with them, they said, aha, the transition is from nuclear fossil to solar. The model is AI plus peer-to-peer. Every village produces, every person is a producer and consumer, and we have batteries in each village, and now we have peer-to-peer exchange in the village. We're all sharing energy. That's phase one. Phase two is connecting the villages. Phase three, we have entire Africa that's electrified, without solar, without fossil. And then they looked at me in the room, they said, okay, this is doable. And then I said, what's the next step? He said, well, we're all engineers. This needs AI and peer-to-peer. We need a different skill set. I said, great, let's do that. Then the third phase was, okay, we need to get the CEO on the board on. It's fantastic. They had the vision, They could see it. AI was not there yet, but they could see it coming. Peer-to-peer was not there yet, but they could see it coming. And then before we started that final part of the work, the CEO was indicted for corruption, for taking money from the nuclear energy sector. So this goes back to Sarkar saying on Proud, you have to have strong ethical values. It doesn't work then. I mean, he was enticed, right? You can't make a lot of money in corruption with solar. It's a few rupees here and there. With nuclear, you can make a lot of money, right? So these local, small scale schemes, and the energy company said, aha, we're going to go from keep the lights on to the connector. And so that was quite a powerful transition. For that, we have to stop seeing ourselves as a corporation. We have to become a platform of energy. For that, we need new skill sets, AI and peer-to-peer. And then finally, I think in Bangladesh 5 years ago, they had the first village doing peer-to-peer energy exchange. So they leapfrogged over Europe and the US. Now it's not national, but it's experiments. So we're proud in that sense, looks for experiments of humanism, experiments of cooperatives, experiments where it's working, and we connect those experiments and make the case, it worked here, can it work globally? It worked here, can it work globally? So we become, in a way, the connectors of the new future to the current present.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for sharing your experience. Really appreciate that.